So we have already meditated the verses. So I've studied from chapter 1 to 5. Today we'll be starting from chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and the daughters were born to them. Verse 2. The sons of God saw the beautiful woman and took any they wanted as their wife. Verse 3. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with the humans for such a long time, for there are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. Verse 4. In those days and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on earth for whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women. They gave birth to children who became the heroes and the famous warriors of ancient times. Verse 5. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. Verse 6. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. Verse 7. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals and the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I'm sorry I ever made them, but Noah found favor in the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on the earth at that time. And he walked in close fellowship with God. Verse 10. Noah was the father of three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 11. Now God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. Verse 12. God observed. God observed all his corruptions in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. Verse 13. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. Verse 14. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Verse 15. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof of all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. Verse 17. Look, I am about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die. Verse 18. But I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Verse 19. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Verse 20. Pairs of every kind of birds and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. Verse 21. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and for all the animals. Verse 22. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Now we'll be studying chapter 7. So, chapter 7, verse 1. When everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth, I can see that you alone are righteous. Take with you 7 pairs, male and female, of each animal I have approved for eating and for sacrifice. Take 1 pair of each of others Verse 3. Also take 7 pairs of each of others. Also, every kind of bird, there must be a male and a female in each pair to ensure that all life will survive on earth after the flood. Verse 4. 7 days from now, I will make the rains pour down on the earth, and it will rain for 40 days and 40 nights, until I have wiped from the earth and all the living things I have created. Verse 5. So Noah did everything as the Lord commanded him. Verse 6. Noah was 600 years old when the flood covered the earth. Verse 7. He went on board the boat to escape the flood. He and his wife and his sons and their wives, with them were all the various kinds of animals, those approved for eating and for sacrifice, and those were not, along with all the ground. Verse 9. They entered the boat in pairs, male and female, just as God had commanded Noah. Verse 10. After 7 days, the waters of the flood came and covered the earth. Verse 11. When Noah was 600 years old, on the 17th day of second month, all the underground waters erupted from the earth, and the rain fell in mighty torrents from the sky. Verse 12. The rain continued to fall for 40 days and 40 nights. Verse 13. That very day Noah had gone into the boat with his wife and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. 14. Verse 14. With them in the boats were pairs of every kind of animal, domestic and wild, large and small, along with birds of every kind. Verse 15. Two by two they came into the boat, representing every living thing that breathes. Verse 16. A male and a female of each kind entered just as God commanded Noah. Then the Lord closed the door behind. Verse 17. For 40 days the flood waters grew deeper, covering the ground and lifting the boat high above the earth. Verse 18. As the water rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. Verse 19. Finally, the water covered even the highest mountain on the earth. Verse 20. Rising more than 22 feet above the highest peaks, all the living things on earth died. Birds, domestic animals, wild animals, small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the people. Verse 22. Everything that breathed and lived on dry land died. Verse 23. God wiped out every living thing that scurried along the ground, and the birds of the sky all were destroyed. The only people who had survived were Noah and those with him in the boat. Verse 24. And the flood water covered the earth for 150 days. So we saw the chapter 6, 7. So we will be moving to chapter 8 of Genesis. Genesis chapter 8 verse 1. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock with him in the boat. Verse 2. He sent a wind to blow across the earth, and the flood waters began to recede. The underground water stopped flowing, and the torrential rain water stopped from the sky were stopped. Verse 3. So the flooded waters gradually receded from the earth after 150 days. Verse 4. Exactly 5 months from the time the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Verse 5. 2.5 months later, as the water continued to go down, the other mountain peaks became visible. Verse 6. After another 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the boat. Verse 7. And released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the floodwaters of the earth had dried up. Verse 8. He also released a dove to see if the water had receded and it could find a dry ground. But the dove could not find a place to land because the water still covered the ground. So it returned to the boat, and Noah held out his hand and drew the dough back inside. Verse 11. After waiting another 7 days, Noah released the dough again. Verse 11. This time the doe returned to him in the evening with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Then Noah knew that the flood water were almost gone. Verse 12. He waited another 7 days and then released the doe again. This time it did not come back. Verse 13. Noah was 601 years old on the first day of the new year, 10.5 months after the flood began. The flood water had almost dried up from the earth. Noah lifted back the covering of the boat and saw that the surface of the ground was drying. Verse 14. 2 more months went by, and at last the earth was dry. Verse 15. Then God said to Noah, verse 16, leave the boat, all of you, you and your wife, and your sons and your wives. Release all the animals, the birds, the livestock, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. So Noah, his wife, and his son, and their wives left the boat. Verse 19. And all the large and small animals and birds came out of the boat, pair by pair. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offering the animals and birds that he had approved for that purpose. Verse 21. And the Lord was pleased with the aroma of the sacrifice and said to them, I will never again curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent towards evil from childhood. I will never again destroy all living things. Verse 22. As long as the earth remains, there will be a planting and the harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Chapter 9, verse 1. Genesis. Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. Then God blessed Noah and his son and told them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Verse 2. All the animals of the earth, all the birds on the sky, of the sky, all the small creatures that scurry along the ground, and all the fish in the sea will look on you with fear and terror. I have placed them in your power. Verse 3. I have given them to you for food, just as I have given to you grains and vegetables. Verse 4. But you must never eat any meat that still has life blood in it. Verse 5. And I will require the blood of anyone who takes another person's life. If a wild animal kills a person, it must die. And anyone who murders a fellow human must die. Verse 6. If anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. Verse 7. Now be fruitful and multiply and repopulate the earth. Verse 8. Then God told Noah and his sons, I hereby confirm my covenant with you and your descendants. Verse 10. And with all the animals and that were on the boat, with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, every creature on the earth. Verse 11. Yes, I am confirming my covenant with you. Never again will floodwaters kill all the living creatures. Never again will flood destroy the earth. Verse 12. Then God said, I am giving you a sign of my covenant with you, with all the living creatures for all generations to come. Verse 13. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. It is the sign of my covenant with you and with all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will appear. The rainbow will appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant with you and with all the living creatures. Never again will the floodwaters destroy all lives. Verse 16. When I see the rainbow in the clouds, I will remember the external covenant between God and every living creature on earth. Verse 17. Then God said to Noah, yes, the rainbow is the sign of covenant. conforming with all the creatures on earth. Verse 18. The sons of Noah who came out of the boat with their father were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the father of Canaan. Verse 19. From these three sons of Noah came all the people who now populate the earth. Verse 20. After the flood, Noah began to cultivate the ground, and he planted a vineyard. Verse 21. One day he drank some wine he had made, and he became drunk and lay naked inside his tent. Verse 22. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw that his father was naked and went outside and told his brother. Verse 23. Then Shem and Japheth took a robe, held it over their shoulders, and backed into the tents to cover their father. As they did this, they looked the other way so they would not see him naked. Verse 24. When Noah woke up from his stupor, he learned that Ham is the youngest son had done. Verse 25. Then he cursed Canaan, the son of Ham. May Canaan be cursed, may be the lowest of servants of his relatives. Verse 26. Then Noah said, May the Lord, the God of Shem, be blessed, and may Canaan be his servant. Verse 27. May God expand the territories of Japheth. May Japheth share the prosperity of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. Verse 28. Noah lived another 350 years after the great flood. Verse 29. He lived 950 years and then he died. Genesis chapter 10, verse 1. This is the account of the families of Shem, Ham, Japheth, the three sons of Noah. Many children were born to them after the great flood. Now we will be seeing the descendants of Japheth. The descendants of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. Verse 3. The descendants of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. Verse 14. The descendants of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kithim, Rodanim. Verse 5. The descendants became the sea-faring people that spread out to the various lands, each identifying by their own language, clan, and the national identity. Verse 6. The descendants of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The descendants of the Cush were Sheba, Havilah, Shabbat, Ramah, Shabbatek. The descendants of Ramah were Sheba and Dan. Verse 8. Cush was also the ancestor of Nimrod, who was the first heroic warrior on earth. Verse 9. Since he was a greater hunter in the world, his name became proverbial. People would say, This man is like Nimrod, the greatest hunter in the world. Verse 10. He built his kingdom in the land of Babylonia, with the cities of Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. From there he expanded his territory to Assyria, building the cities of Nineveh, Rehoboth, Elakar. Verse 12. And Reshon, the great city located between the Nineveh and Kala. Verse 13. Mizraim was the ancestor of the Ludites, Anamites, Lehabites, Nephatites. Verse 14. Pathrusites, Casulites, and the Kaphorites, from whom the Philistines came. Canaan's oldest son was Sidon, the ancestor of Sidonians. Canaan was also with the ancestor of Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Aravites, Zemarites, and Hamathatites. The Canaanites clan eventually spread out, and the territories of Canaan extended to Sidon in the north of Gerar and Gaza, in the south and east as far as Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zebulun near Lasha. Verse 20. These were the descendants of Ham, identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity. Now we will be looking at the descendants of Shem. Sons were also born to Shem, the oldest brother of Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the descendants of Eber. The descendants of Shem were Helm, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram. Descendants of Aram were Uz, Ul, Gether, Mush. Arphaxad was the father of Shelum. Shelai was the father of Eber. Eber had two sons. The first was named Pelag, which means division. But during his lifetime, the people of the world were divided into different language groups. His brother name was Joktan. Verse 26. Joktan was the ancestor of Al-Maodad, Shelfa, Azar Mahawith, Zeraha, Hadmoram, Zal, Dikhal. Verse 28. Obal, Abimahel, Sheba, verse 29, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the descendants of Jakotan. The territory they occupied extended from the Mesha all the way to Sephar in the eastern mountains. 31. These were the descendants of Shem identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity. Verse 32 of chapter 10. These are the clans that descendants from the Noah's son, arranged by nations according to their lines of descent. All the nations of the earth descended from this clan after the great flood. Now we will be meditating the chapter 11 of Genesis. Genesis chapter 11 verse 1. At one time all the people of the world spoke the same language and used the same word. Verse 2. As the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylonia and settled there. Verse 3. They began saying to each other, "Let's make the bricks and harden them with fire." Verse 4. Then they said, "Come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being shattered all over the world." Verse 5. But the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower the people were building. "Look," he said, "people are united and they all speak the same language." After this, nothing they set out to do with the impossible for them. Verse 7. "Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages, then they won't be able to understand each other." Verse 8. In that way, the Lord shattered all over the world and they stopped building the city. Verse 9. That is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with the different languages. In this way, he shattered them all over the world. Verse 10. This is the account of Shem's family. 2 years after the great flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. After the birth of Arphaxad, Shem lived another 500 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 12. When Arphaxad was 35 years old, he became the father of Shelal. Verse 13. After the birth of the Shelai, Arphaxad lived another 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 14. When Shelah was 30 years old, he became the father of Eber. Verse 15. After the birth of Eber, Shelah lived another 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 16. When Eber was 34 years old, he became the father of Peleg. Verse 17. After the birth of Peleg, lived another 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu was 32 years old, he became the father of Sherach. Verse 21. After the birth of Sherach, Reu lived another 207 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 22. When Sherach was 30 years old, he became the father of Nahor. Verse 23. After the birth of Nahor, Sherach lived another 200 years and other sons and daughters. Verse 24. When Nahor was 29-year old, he became the father of Terah, was 25. After the birth of Terah, Nahor lived another 119 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 26. After Terah was 70-year old, he became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Verse 27. This is the account of Terah's family. Terah was the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran was the father of Lot. But Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, the land of his birth, while his father Terah was still living. Verse 29. Meanwhile, Abraham and Nahor both married. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of the Nahor wife was Melech. But verse 30. But Sarai was unable to become pregnant and had no children. Verse 31. One day Terah took his son Abraham, his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his grandson Lot, and moved away from Ur of the Chaldeans. He was headed up for the land of Canaan. But they stopped for Haran and settled there. Terah lived for 205 years and died when still in the Haran. Thank you. Today we have read the Bible from chapter 6 to 11. Tomorrow we'll be continuing from chapter 11, from chapter 12 to chapter 16. So praise the Lord. Thank you for watching. You can subscribe my channel and leave your comments if you want how we can improve the Bible reading. Thank you for watching. Bye.